Welcome to Discovering. How many of you out there have read this novel? It's one of the 12 Woods Cop mystery novels written by author Joseph Heywood. I recently sat down with Joe to talk about the series and his latest novel, Out of Service.
The UP is a character itself. I have people actually drive the routes that my officers drive in the novels.
And we check out how the DNR does their annual fall walleye night surveys.
Young of the year walleye. That's what we're looking for.
So sit back and relax. It's Monday night and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forests thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Woods Cop mystery writer Joseph Heywood recently released his latest novel, Out of Service, the 12th book of the series.
I wrote that title about 10 years ago. I knew that would be the last title and the last line of the book. Years and years ago. If I whatever number it was going to be, this was what it was going to be. What the story was going to be, I had no clue.
The protagonist of the Woods Cop mystery series is Conservation Officer Grady Service, and in each novel is a new mystery set in the woods and waters of the UP.
I try and get my people into places that most readers probably never get there on their own, and I want to tempt them a little bit to get out of their vehicles and go look.
This one is set in the ghost towns and wild spaces of the Keweenaw Peninsula.
One of the many, many treasures for the eyes that this state has. We won't bring you to ugly places, okay? We promise.
And that's where I met up with Joe to talk about his Woods Cop series and his inspiration.
Because this terrain is so rough around here, all around here, this is rough stuff. Things can go on here that you're not going to see unless you find them for a reason. You don't stumble across things. And that's why the things that are in the book are up here. I make it a point when I write a book to put my boots on the ground wherever I write about. And the only place I've never done it is there's some stuff that takes place at the end of the book, which is to the east of the radar station, and those vertical drops in there. I've never actually seen those, so I had to look at topo maps and kind of guess at it. Everything I've ever written about, other than one other thing in a foreign book, I've been on the ground there. And that just makes it more interesting for readers, I think, especially if they happen to have been there too. They like that a lot.
Joe wrote this latest novel while living in the old mining town of Central, located along US 41 between Calumet and Copper Harbor.
The nice thing about coming up here is the quiet. It's serene, it's isolated, and you can get out and wander around the woods and let your mind wander, and you're not clouded over by a lot of other things. We don't have a TV up here.
Joe and his wife Lonnie have lived all over the Upper Peninsula.
We were in Alberta 8 years. We were in Stevenson for a year. We were in Deer Park and that area for 6 years. So we've been all around. And then if you take my time up here for patrols and stuff, you know, I've lived in Iron County a lot, and I've lived in Mackinac County and Chippewa County. Lived all over the place up here.
Before our interview, Joe and Lonnie gave me a quick tour of Central.
Now there's only about 8 or 9 houses that are left. They're actual dwellings, and the rest is foundations and ruins. Those two houses down there, the one you were just in for a sec, that's the visitor center where people come in. There's a video and all that sort of stuff. And this place was open from around 1854 to 1898. Some of the purest copper in the entire world ever, then and now. There's not many places like this. The Cliff Mine down the road was like this. This is where the second mine shaft was, and there were buildings all in here. There's all kinds of ruins in here. If you go back in here, it looks like woods, but once you get in there, it's old ruins and old walls and all kinds of things all over the place. It's quite fascinating. It's a little hard to get around in there. There's a lot of sweet pea and things like that on the ground, so you spend most of your time trying not to fall on your face. We call this the Garden of Eden.
So there's a question I get asked all the time, which I don't like, but I'm going to ask you, do you have a favorite book?
Yeah, the one I'm working on. Same as you, program you're working on, right? Of course it is, yeah. What's your favorite kid? You know, all of them. Whatever one I'm dealing with at that day. No, I don't have a favorite. The first one was Ice Hunter, yeah, that was the very first one. And that was about diamond exploration up here, which I learned about in the 80s when I was working for the Upjohn Company. I thought someday I may look into that and see if there's a book there. And so when I decided to do this series about conservation officers, that was the first one I did. What happened was I wrote the first book about the Ice Hunter and gave it to my agent in New York, and then she went to the publisher and she showed them. They said, well, what about some other ideas? So I gave them 12 synopses of plots. And so then they bought this book, Lions Press, and it started from there. And that was in 2001. Now, why did I make him a game warden? Random choice in some sense. But I grew up I'm an Air Force brat, so I grew up all over the world. But I'm from Rhine Cliff, New York, which is on the Hudson River. And my dad's best friend was the biggest violator in Dutchess County when they were kids. And World War II came along. My dad had joined the military in 1938, and then his friend joined after Pearl Harbor and became a Marine and went into the Pacific. And when he came back from the war, the county made him the game warden because they appointed him in those days. And so they took the biggest poacher and turned him into the game warden. So that was all I knew about it, other than he cleaned up the county. That I heard too, because everybody complained about him. He was really tough on people. I mean, he was really tough.
Most people you talk to that spend a lot of time outdoors in the UP have a favorite spot. Main character Grady has his, and in the books, it's called the Mosquito Wilderness.
And there was a period of time in my life where people would call my home at 4 o'clock in the morning and saying, "I've found the Mosquito Wilderness." And I'd go, "What?" And they'd say, "I found the Mosquito Wilderness. Where are you?" "Well, I'm in such and such." "Nope, that's not it." Damn, they'd hang up. So that went on for several years off and on. And I still get questions about it. People always want to tell me that they know where it is. It's a real place. It doesn't have that name. And I just don't care to have people traipsing into that particular spot. It's a very real place, yeah, it is. Just doesn't have that name.
I moonlight as a videographer for the Warden's TV program for the past 7 or 8 years, riding around with our local conservation officers. And that is where I first heard about Joe's books and was intrigued to learn how his experiences leap from the passenger seat of those trucks to the pages we read.
I write about contemporary conservation officers, and I ride around with them. About a month a year I'm in trucks with them. I've been doing that for 22 years. They've taken me all over the state into all kinds of situations you can't imagine. Situations that don't end up in programs like Wardens. You don't really see the nasty things they have to deal with. And so their characters, the people they deal with their characters, and then the environment and the geography here is also a character. Because the UP, the weather here, and the geography itself determines what you can do. Some of these scenes that take place in the books are based on actual experiences I've had with the officers. Others are ones I make up. But I try to make them real based on the experience I've gotten with these people. One of the things, it's a great honor to be able to do what I do. And great trust has been given to me to not hurt their operation in any way. And so I try not to do that. One of the things I will do is when I'm with an officer and we're going into something, I will say to him, what are you thinking about right now? What factors are we concerned about? What are we going to be looking for when we get this based on what we know? And they're very giving to me and very candid about what they're thinking about. And that goes on all through the patrols. And so then over time has allowed me to accrue a certain amount of knowledge, superficial, but to accrue a pretty good base of understanding of how they think in certain situations, and then to try and apply that to my characters to make it as realistic as possible. I try and build each book around some particular issue that relates to the outdoors or the environment or to law enforcement, and how that then impacts on these officers in the environment where they operate. And so one is about endangered species, and one is about poaching. And one book, Buccular Dystrophy, is about the people who just can't help killing stuff. They're not going to shoot 2 deer; they're going to shoot 20 deer. The other thing that's interesting is you asked me earlier: is it based on things that happen? Yes, but I make some scenes up, a lot of scenes. People cannot tell me which ones are real and which ones are made up. That's how bizarre a conservation officer's job is. They get into so many weird situations that you wouldn't believe it unless you actually were there to witness it. So oftentimes the ones that they're thinking are made up are the real ones, and the ones that they think are real are the ones that are made up. So that's probably a measure of writing skill or strategy or something, but I think it's just been a kind of an interesting experience to see people give you feedback that way.
Joe shared one experience during an illegal pike spearing operation that is so outrageous that you're left unsure if it's fact or fiction.
And it was Easter Sunday, 37 degrees out, raining. Water was 37 degrees, and the creek was swollen. And we were down on our knees in the water and setting our equipment up on a big boulder, like a base camp. Suddenly he goes, "We got to go, they're leaving," and he took off. Well, he's about 6'4" and runs like an antelope. And so I go after him, and I walk forward, and I hit something, and it spins me. It's a tree. And when it spins me, dumps me right into the creek. And so I hit in the water. I went, "Oh, God." And I immediately pulled myself up to the surface. It was overflowing. There's a culvert there. So I immediately did a kick around. So I went down through the thing like Jesus with my arms out. And it shot me out of the end of the culvert. And when it shot me out, I hit something, and it spun me. And as it spun me, a spotlight shined right down on my face. It was the spearing crew who were leaving in their vehicles, and they went across the bridge. And when they saw me, they threw their spear out on the road, and they kept going. And so I go, it's sweeping me down. It's about 300 yards out to Lake Michigan from where I go in the water. And I thought, this is not good. So I just very relaxed, and I just put my arms out and kept them out until I finally hooked something. When I did, I kicked a leg over and I swam onto the beach, scraped my face when I hit the beach. Never lost my glasses in the whole thing. Never lost my hat. Lost my flashlight. And finally, my partner comes and goes, we got him. It's a dead-end road. They got to turn around. I'm going,
While this latest novel ends with Grady's retirement, his story is not over.
He retires at the end of this book. But every officer I know, or almost every one of them, has a real adjustment that first year because they've lived this intense, varied, crazy way of life for so long that first year they're off from it, even if they got something that they're doing formally, it drives them crazy not being out in the woods doing it. So I want to see how he deals with it. I don't know how it'll turn out because I never do with these, but that's the plan, and that's my interest in it. I want to give him then the same experience that a lot of these officers have and see how he deals with it. And we'll see how it turns out. When will it be done? No idea. I have started it, actually.
And it doesn't sound like Joseph Heywood has any plans at retirement either.
I think there will probably come a day when I'll have to slow down, and I'll figure that out when it comes. And until then, I just keep pumping the gas. And if I hit a tree every now and then or go through a culvert, so it goes.
As it turns out, a flashlight isn't the only thing he lost that day in the culvert. Hear the rest of that story and Joseph Heywood's full interview on my website, discovertheup.com, and the Discover the UP podcast.
What we're doing out here tonight is we're looking for the young of the year walleye. Those are the fish that hatched out this spring. So we're kind of looking and getting a gauge of how successful the reproduction was this past spring. Whether, you know, they pulled off a good year class. We're also going to be looking at some of the yearlings, the fish that were spawned out a year ago. And then also we'll note any adult walleye that we see too. But primarily we're just looking at those YOY, or the young of the year walleye, and also those yearling walleye, which are typically, the YOYs are usually like 4 to 7, 8 inches long. And the yearlings are anywhere from that like 9 to 12 inches long. So depending on the lake. We repeat this same survey every fall so that we can kind of get an idea, you know, from year to year if it's comparable, and if there's a, you know, a really good year class in say 2024 as compared to like 2023 or last year.
They do this survey at night so there's less conflict with anyone else on the lakes, and it's easier to see into the water and spot the fish.
I believe we have a 3-mile station, and we're kind of surveying the northeast shore of Bond Falls. We're kind of targeting that near shore water too, depths from like 1 foot to 5-6 foot of water. It's pretty effective shocking that range. These are called the booms of our electrofishing boat right here. They provide the power into the water, and then also the hull itself is actually our ground. So anything, all the power is pushed through here, and there's an electromagnetic field that's going around our boat in the front right here. And that's what we're shocking. We're shocking this area right out in the front. And so any fish that we come across will get shocked in this field right here. The more conductive the water is, the farther out it will go. And then also water depth plays a factor too. The deeper the water, the harder it is for us to push power deeper. Yep, that's a 1-year-old right there probably.
Typically we're going to run anywhere, depending on conductivity, as low as 200 or 300 volts all the way up to 1100 volts when we're shocking fish. We want to be able to stun the fish, dip them, get them in the tank, and have them recover within a few seconds to a minute, depending on fish size. Larger fish have more surface area. They tend to absorb more current. They take a little longer to come back. But when everything's adjusted right, all of our fish come back pretty quickly, and our mortality doing this is nearly zero.
Adult walleye right there. We got some perch here, a pike. Of course, we're going to shock other fish too. We'll see northern pike and black crappie in here, as well as smallmouth bass and different minnow species. What's our water temp, Kyle?
62.7.
Oh, so it really dropped. So we start shocking and doing this survey when the water temperature is below 70 degrees. Typically it's between 55 and 70. So it's September normally when we do the survey. At those water temps, the walleye will come to shallow water areas, sandy shores, also maybe a little gravel. But yeah, this is when they come to the shallow areas, so we can actually shock them. Oh, do we have one? Oh, we do. There's a YOY right there. Young of the year walleye. That's what we're looking for.
This crew shocks about a dozen lakes every fall.
We have 2 other crews that are doing the same exact type of survey throughout the UP right now. So we have 1 crew right now, I think that's over towards Iron Mountain area, just north of Iron Mountain. And then we got another crew that is on the eastern end of the UP doing like the Manistee area lakes.
After they shocked the 3-mile shoreline, the crew counted and measured their catch and took a fin clip of the smaller fish.
This winter, then Kyle's going to age these and help us determine, which ones are young of the year, which ones are 0, which ones are 1, which ones are 2, to find those breaks to help measure year class strength. 11.5, 15. Yeah, these ones, the adults, we're just going to measure to the inch group. The smaller ones we'll measure all the way to the 10th. 9, 8, 4, 9.
Got quite a few 4s, 5s, tapers off, and then you pick up between the 8s, 9s, and 10s.
It's usually your year class break, but not always. So getting right close to that 20 per mile mark that usually suggests they pulled off a decent year class that year that's going to represent as adult fish, as 15-inch fish 3 to 5 years from now. We should see these fish down the road as adults, from the 2024 year class.
That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.